Well, it looks like the influx of people to the meeting has tapered off, so I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you to my colleagues and Dr. Snow who organized this seminar. This afternoon, I'm delighted to introduce two players in our department community who have dedicated a lot of time and interest to non-governmental organizations, conservation groups. So one of the outcomes that we hope to deliver to the students through our seminar series is the recognition that there are a lot of career pathways out there for them to pursue. I know that we have alumni from our department who work for Greenpeace. I know we have alumni who work for the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. So clearly conservation groups and non-governmental organizations are one of the pathways that our alumni can engage with. Our first speaker this afternoon is Jen Barborak. Congratulations, Jen, because a week ago today, the university released some good news that Jen has been appointed the executive director of the Buell Regional Health Foundation. So she's becoming a player in healthcare. In the last week, I have also become aware that she has been involved with starting several nonprofit organizations. She earned her bachelor's in science and environmental studies in 2002, and immediately thereafter, in addition to many other things, started cooking up a plan to create a group called the Shenango River Watchers. Shenango River is the drainage basin that drains from Pymatuning Lake down through Newcastle on its way down to the Ohio River. And so their group has just done stupendous things. With no further ado, Jen, it's all yours.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Dr. Burkhart for the opportunity to speak to you and hopefully inspire you as students today. Briefly, I'm going to tell you just a little wee tiny bit about my childhood because my love of the environment came from spending time with my grandfather who taught me to appreciate nature. But as a young girl growing up in the 70s and 80s, you're often pushed away from working in an environmental career. You're supposed to aspire to work in jobs such as teaching or nursing. And so the women in my family were nurses, and I followed in their footsteps and went to nursing school. Fresh out of nursing school at the age of 20, I started my career in the emergency department at Sharon Regional Health System. And while there, I met my husband, who was then a paramedic, and someone who had the common interest of a love of the environment. And that's very important. I was an excellent nurse, and I tried several different fields of nursing. But when it came down to the time to get my bachelor's, I realized I just could not stand the thought of being a nurse manager. And so the field of nursing just didn't seem to fit who I was. I didn't even enjoy it. And I was spending a ton of time in the environment. So I decided to graduate from Penn State University, which was where I had received my nursing diploma through, and took those credits with an associate's degree and transferred to Slippery Rock University, where I entered the environmental studies program. While at Slippery Rock, I took Dr. Burkhart's environmental geography class, and we watched the Lorax. And believe it or not, I had never even read the book. And I still to this day remember the first time I heard the Lorax say, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better, it's not. So my husband and I, we used to canoe our river all the time, and we constantly were finding trash and illegal dumps, things like hot water heaters, a riding mower, a bird hanging in fishing line. We were appalled at the filth that we saw along the Shenango River. And we had canoed in other parts of the country that were cleaner. But we kept coming back to the fact that if you looked beyond the litter, that the Shenango River was equally as beautiful as any other river that we had canoed. And I kept thinking there has to be something I can do. In the meantime, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. came to Penn State Shenango to talk about his Riverkeeper organization. After his presentation, I mustered up the courage to talk to him about the Shenango River, and I asked him what we could do to clean it up. So after a few phone calls with him, he found that I truly was interested in making a difference. So he flew me to Pensacola, Florida, to attend a Riverkeeper convention And that's where I met river keepers from all over the country. Keep in mind, I was still in school at Slippery Rock and working full-time in the emergency department in Greenville. And so while in Florida, I learned the basics of how to start a nonprofit organization. It was inspiring to hear the different stories from river keepers across the country. And when I returned, I felt empowered to gather people together to clean up the Shenango River. I held a public meeting, and it was my first ever public speaking experience. And some of my professors at Slippery Rock actually helped me to put it together. And a few of them even drove to Hermitage to attend the meeting, really to provide me emotional support, I think. I hoped for about 10 people to show up, but the small venue was packed with over 70 people. So I knew we had a problem and that we needed to get to work to address it. Of those attendees, we found that helped me to write a mission, a vision, and bylaws. We incorporated the group, and then I started the long process of submitting and becoming a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and that was approved in 2001. My vision for the group was to clean up, preserve, and protect the environmental, scenic, and recreational attributes of the Shenango River watershed, which, keep in mind, is about 1,092 square miles. So we bit off a large chunk. We started out by organizing cleanup days with volunteers, and they went along and picked up litter from the riverbanks. It was a small start, but my friends at Slippery Rock were some of the first people to drive all the way to Sharon to participate in some of our first cleanup days. Some of the professors who are still here today, like Dr. Livingston, I think maybe Dr. Hathaway, maybe Dr. Dina Cola is still around, and Dr. Burkhardt, of course, were pivotal in helping me to start the organization and in driving me to start the organization. What the organization has accomplished in 20 years is so much more than I could ever imagined as a college student. Our biggest hurdle was that the entire community saw what my husband and I had seen, a dirty, smelly, polluted river, and the community insisted that there was nothing we could do about it. Our cleanup days were viewed as putting a Band-Aid on a cancerous sore. Nevertheless, we persisted and we began a series of presentations to the community about the geography of the river and encouraging people to help us prevent non-point source pollution. We painted storm drains, we hung informational hangers on people's doorknobs, we placed educational paper placemats in restaurants along the river, and from that, we created a movement around the preservation and protection of the river. The effort was exhausting, and we hit a ton of hurdles. One dump that we encountered along the river in Greenville on a rail-to-trail project took over 2 weeks to clean up with heavy equipment, hundreds of volunteers on foot who hauled over 250,000 pounds of garbage away from the riverbanks. Another dump in Jamestown required hundreds of volunteers who pulled another 75,000 pounds of garbage from a wetland. That was fun. One thing that we continuously found in the dumps was tires. So we decided to host tire collection days where people could drop off tires for free. There have not been many of those tire collection days over the past 15 years where we have not filled a semi-truck. Throughout the years, the big dumps have become harder for us to find because we've cleaned them all up. And what used to require 8 to 10 cleanups a year is now maintained in 2 cleanups and 1 tire collection. 1 cleanup we always have on or around Earth Day. To date, the organization has cleaned up over 1.9 million pounds of litter from the watershed, and we've recycled over 70,000 tires. I should mention that in 2002, right as Shenango River Watchers was gaining popularity, I did graduate from Slippery Rock University with a bachelor's in science and environmental studies, and I was still working full-time in the ER as an RN. My daughter, Emma, was born in 2003, and she'll be the first to tell you that she spent most of her childhood on the river, for good or bad. And that's her in the lower corner there. Sometime around 2011, while the organization was not having to place so much focus on cleaning up litter, we began the task of creating a state-designated water trail along the Shenango. To receive that designation, we had to place accent points every 2 miles and maintain a river that was clear of paddling obstructions. This proved to be more difficult than we imagined because we found there was really no environmentally friendly way to pull fallen trees and pin them to the side of the banks, except by recruiting Amish men and their horses. The 23-mile project took 2 years to permit and 5 more years to complete. We now can host 2 paddle events a year that have approximately 450 kayaks or canoes participating. Bringing people together to enjoy the river is so important for us, and all the river has to offer historically can be viewed along these paddle events. There are places along the river where we can actually see remnants of the Erie Canal. Each paddle event does culminate with an afternoon of food, music, camaraderie, and then it ultimately raises just a small amount of funding for our operating expenses related to the very expensive maintenance of this water trail. As our board evolved, we've added college professors and environmental scientists who began to organize research projects along the river. The organization has conducted research on macroinvertebrates, fish, mussels, point source pollution from PCBs, and some of the research has been published. We also started a program called Environmental Education Day. This is my favorite. We bus 5th graders from Sharon and Farrell schools to low-income schools. They come to Beale Park and they rotate through environmental learning stations where they learn about trees and birds. They've built fish habitat structures for Shenango Lake and for Beale Park. And they've even learned to navigate with a compass. This day remains highly successful, and it's one that the kids look forward to every year. 2 years ago, the organization took on the revitalization of the Shenango Trail, which is a hiking trail along the Shenango River that spans 8 miles. The new project brings on board a group of people who until recently would not even have been interested in a river group: hikers, trail runners, ATV and snowmobile groups, equestrian groups, bird watchers. So we organize those groups for trail work several times a year, and we've begun the process of restoring the trail to a usable status. For me, with the help and support of members of my community, I've started several other nonprofit organizations, and I just wanted to briefly touch on those so you can get a feel for what groups of people can do. I started the City of Sharon Beautification Commission, which is a government-run nonprofit, about 13 years ago while I was on Sharon City Council. For this, despite negative comments from the community and fellow council members, I gathered a group of people who felt like I did about how beautiful Sharon could attract families and businesses. And we pressed on until I had a majority vote to start the commission. Though I've had to resign from the group after I moved from Sharon to Hermitage, to this day, that group, because of the foundation that we laid and the proper leadership, continues to clean up the city of Sharon, revitalize neighborhoods and city parks, and place and maintain over 100 hanging baskets in the spring and summer. They also decorate the city for fall and winter holidays and have just in general beautification projects. Another organization that I started called the Friends of MERP is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and it funds a social service organization whose main goal is to provide gently used medical equipment on loan to people who need the equipment but can't afford to buy it. MERP loans thousands of pieces of medical equipment each year to the low income and elderly populations of Mercer and Lawrence counties. I was the coordinator for MERP from 03 to 08, a position I earned because I had volunteered for the organization. Other volunteers helped me to start the Friends group because they saw the value of the program and they understood the financial needs and, more importantly, the funding opportunities that would be available to a 501c3 organization. Oddly, when my daughter was going to age out of a middle school robotics program at Sharon Schools, and the school needed a coach to start a high school robotics team and a booster organization, my husband and I sprung into action, and we found a committed group of parents to help us found and coach a First Tech Challenge program. And we started a 501c3 booster club through which we could fund the program. Now, keep in mind, my husband and I are both nurses. We have nothing to do with engineering, but we saw a need. We assembled the group of people that were necessary to fix the problem. And then we did what was necessary to ensure that the kids had the resources that they needed to be competitive. About 9 years ago, a successful business owner in our community approached me because of my work with Shenango River Watchers and asked me to help bring Waterfire, which is an arts organization from Providence, Rhode Island, to Sharon. Now, Waterfire celebrates the beauty of fire and water by placing bonfires on the Shenango River. Now, keep in mind, this is the Shenango River that 20 years ago, everybody thought was dirty and smelly. But because we had changed that vision and that belief of the river through Shenango River Watchers, businesses and businessmen felt that we could actually make a difference in downtown Sharon along that river by bringing something like Waterfire here. The event draws over 30,000 people, and it includes a day-long artisan market, live music, children's activities, and then it ends in the evening with the lighting of these bonfires on the river, stoked by volunteers from boats. The event requires over 300 volunteers and is another nonprofit that I can be proud to have had a hand in starting. I worked in the nonprofit environmental field briefly in 2008, and I don't have any pictures of that, by starting and growing the macroinvertebrate laboratory for an environmental engineering firm. And though the work was fun and rewarding, the hours were long and difficult for a mom. My daughter was just 6. So ultimately, after 6 years of working there, I returned to the nonprofit community as a grant writer, again for the medical equipment recycling program. And though not a lucrative job, it was rewarding. I obtained my master's in grant writing and nonprofit program evaluation at that time, and I soon advanced in my position at UPMC Horizons Community Health Foundation as their interim director when my boss retired this January. In September, I resigned from that position to become the executive director for the 6-year-old Beale Regional Health Foundation. The $39 million Health Conversion Foundation gives away approximately $750,000 a year to the community, supporting health and wellness related initiatives. To take this position, at which, for you students to know, I earn about over $90,000, I had to resign from everything that I just told you I created. On the other hand, it was so hard to let go, but it was kind of easier because I knew that every organization had a solid framework and excellent leadership. So you have to understand that it took me a lot of years, a lot of courage, a great husband, making a lot of good life choices and learning from my many bad choices before I felt the passion to attempt to inflict a positive change on our community. When I did find that there was something I believed in, I rolled up my sleeves. I surrounded myself with the people that I could find that also believed in that vision, and we together began a transformation in the community. We were met with so much negativity for every single one of these groups. You can't change the way people feel about our river was something I'd hear, or you're treating a cancerous sore with a Band-Aid. Cleaning up litter does nothing. You're wasting your time forming a commission that will beautify Sharon. How will you ever get anyone to believe that you could make a difference? So these negative comments only made us band together stronger, rising above the negativity and continuing to work towards the goal of revitalizing the community. It's not that one person makes a difference by doing it himself. It's that one person has the vision to make a difference and assembles the team to do it. So I'd like to offer, before I go, the following advice to the Slippery Rock students that are listening today. First, don't go through college thinking that Slippery Rock is your whole life. It seems like it's your whole life right now, but it's simply a bridge to what your life is going to be. And I always think about Legos and how you snap together Legos to create a new object. So think of yourself as that new object in its final form. And each class, friend, teacher, and experience at Slippery Rock is a separate Lego. And you've already got different Legos that have built you to this point from high school. The final product, though, that graduates from Slippery Rock is a young man or a woman who when they graduate goes out into the world with this absolutely insane ability to do great things. For all of us, there are lots of negative experiences that we always want to forget about, but you can't. That's where you learned a lesson. And those are the little Lego pieces that you use to fill in the gaps. And then there's many different positive experiences that are the big blocks. And they're here at Slippery Rock if you look hard enough. I found them in the halls and classrooms, in the gym, in the stadium, and out there in the Slippery Rock community. Use those to make yourself stronger so that when you graduate, you've built a great person who simply needs those little finishing pieces to make a difference. Then find your cause and do something about it. If you see a need in your community, find a group of people who share your views and create a movement. Focus your energy on positive efforts, and the negativity it magically goes away. It's amazing what one person can start, and you can be the start of it. Again, don't try to do it alone because it's better if you don't. I have found very good friends, and some of my dearest friends now have come through my volunteer positions in the community. If people tell you you can't do it, they're not the right people for you to be listening to. Find and surround yourself with the people who tell you it can be done and who want to help you. They're the ones that are going to lift you up and make you stronger. Lastly, in my opinion, volunteering is the absolute best way to take what you are learning in college and after college and apply it in your personal life. I would simply not be the CEO of a multi-million-dollar foundation at the age of 48 without my volunteer experiences. And most importantly, without having the personal drive to want to make a difference. It's extremely rewarding to start a group and be able to walk away from it, knowing that even though you're no longer there, you can watch it grow into more you could ever have imagined it to be. So today, I'm challenging all of you to set up a personal goal that will make a positive impact on something you believe in during your lifetime. You might think, oh, that problem's too big. I can't do anything about it. The beauty is you don't have to do it alone. You just have to have the desire to do it and start the process. It's my personal hope that each and every one of you Slippery Rock graduates will make a difference in the world by positively influencing your own little part of the world, and you can do it. It's there within each of us, the ability to do good and to work together for good and to change the world for a better. And I challenge each of you to dream big and to positively change your world. Thank you.
Shoo-wee, Jen. Shoo-wee, we are not worthy. We are not worthy. In a discussion before we got started here today, I thought that someone ought to get a bucket of water and throw it on Jen because she's on fire. She's on fire. But since you gave that presentation, A, I got tears in my eyes. B, I wonder why you're not our commencement speaker. And C, I wrote a memo and I'm nominating you for sainthood. All righty. So needless to say, we are proud over the moon to have you in our community.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. And we may have time for Q&A after the end of Brett's presentation, but I thought that it would be fun to try a tag team approach. So I asked Brett McClinton, and he is a geography student of some flavor. He'll have to tell you his background. But Dr. Wong introduced me to him in the hallway one day, and we chatted together for about 2 minutes before I was completely convinced that he and I held a lot of similar interests. So, of course, since that day, I've been poisoning him to get his mind to think like a geologist. And it was through that I gained awareness that he too is a player in an NGO and trying to make a big difference in the lives of people who live along the Allegheny River. So Brett, please take it from there and introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Brett McClinton. I'm a senior this year in the GEGE department, geology major, geography minor. It's eerie how many coincidences came up in your speaking there, Jen. I also come from a nursing family. My mom was an ER nurse growing up. I myself was a paramedic for like 3 years. Worked in the Grove City, Mercer County area. Just a lot of little things. You know, us with our nonprofit, when we were setting up, there were a lot of naysayers. So I think that's a common theme when you're trying to make a change, is you're going to run into plenty of opposition. I always like, I think it was W.C. Fields that once said the only person that likes change is a wet baby. So that being said, I think we end up with difficulties like that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, I think. Is that working? Oh, okay, so I'm sharing. Okay, so this is actually a quote that Dr. B gave me, and I can't tell you how much this like simple little quote really gives me a lot to think about. And I've shared it with our executive director. She's put it on her Facebook page. We're all big fans of it. But I think what Anne Frank's getting at is you don't have to like found a nonprofit. You don't have to join a nonprofit. You could help some old woman carry her groceries in. You can become a scout leader. You could start a Bible study at your church. There's hundreds and thousands of ways where you could change people's lives, even in the tiniest little fraction. You know, you can make a big difference on a small scale. And the easiest way to do that, like Jen said, is volunteering. And also, it's a hell of a lot easier to volunteer if you're volunteering in something that you believe in and that you feel passionately about. It becomes a lot easier, and you'll be surprised how fast you will fall down a rabbit hole. It is really easy to do. So let's see if my screen sharing will work here. Okay, so as I said, I'm with Armstrong Trails. I'm one of the board members. That's just my information and our link to our website. I'll put that up at the end, you know, when we field some questions later. This is our mission statement, and I'm going to kind of dwell on that a little bit. We're going to protect and convert railroad corridors into trails for public use. And it also says that we are going to preserve the integrity of those corridors for future transportation. So one of the programs that we use to gain these rail corridors is called rail banking. And there's some stipulations that make certain rail corridors more eligible than others, but it works with the Surface Transportation Board. We apply for some special things. We pay a lot of money. We have to buy that land. So there's a lot of money that goes around, but inevitably those rail bank corridors are there if there was, say, a war effort and we needed to move freight around the country again. Those rail corridors are reserved as corridors to be able to move goods and supplies again should the need arise. Little basic history about our organization. We were established in 1991, as I said, to acquire and manage abandoned rail corridors. It was a private organization. A bunch of people got together and formed a nonprofit organization and financed and got together through the bank about $250,000. And they had the backing of the Armstrong County and some other organizations, the Conservation District over there. And so they worked together and bought the rail corridor, which runs from East Brady, Pennsylvania, down through Katanning and Ford City to Roston, Pennsylvania, a distance of about 37 miles. As we said, we've met a lot of opposition. There are people with camps on there that assumed that they were going to get reversionary rights whenever the railroad was abandoned. They were none too happy that we were going to end up with that. There's 16 and a half years of legal battles that ensued after that, trying to get the trail done. Some of the first trail that went down you see here was in 1995 when we laid the first 1.5 miles of trail through Ford City. Reason being because Ford City was willing to work with us, you know, and so was the City of Katanning and the Armstrong County Commissioners. It was just a lot of the campers and different interest groups around the area just really didn't want us in there. The last piece of trail to go down was the 3.5 miles from Reimer to the Allegheny River Lock and Pool number 9, which finished out that 37 miles of trail. the big deal with what our organization did is we are the first organization that privately rail banked. Until 1991, all the other organizations were government entities and things like that. So that was one of the reasons why we met with a lot of opposition, because nobody had tried to do this before. So we pretty much had to pave the way for all this. And to this day, the Rails to Trails Commission still uses the resources and precedents set down by Moody versus the AVLT, which is the Allegheny Valley Land Trust, which is our parent organization, to actually use those precedents to establish private rail banking for other organizations. So it's been something that we're really proud of winning that and establishing some cool precedent so that other organizations can accomplish the same things we did with a lot less friction. So this is how I got into this nonprofit. My buddy Rich there in the background on the left here, he and I are geocachers. We have a small organization, kind of a loose association of geocachers, which are sort of like nerdy treasure hunters that use our GPSs to look for Tupperware in the woods, so to speak. But we also, like, I've worked with GeoMash in your area, Jen, on some of the CEDOs, which is cash in, trash out events that have helped clean up over there. So I'm real familiar with that program. So very cool, and thank you. But yeah, so we started off as volunteers, just like Jen. We saw a need. They didn't have enough people. There was a lot of things that needed done. So we talked to the executive director and started showing up for meetings. And the first thing we did was adopted a mile of trail through the Adopt a Mile program. And that's what the sign is in the middle. We have signage on all of our miles that we adopted, showing that our geocaching organization is taking care of that particular 3 miles. So we're up to 3 miles now from the original 1 mile. A couple of years ago, we ended up on the board of directors through a strange twist in fate. You know, people kind of just asked us if we would, because they're looking for younger people like all of you. You know, we need people that have heart and soul and passion. Because a lot of our board of directors, and you'll see in some of the pictures that follow, a lot of our board of directors are old guys that have been there since 1991, since the inception of this organization, and they're tired. You know, that they're passionate, but they're tired, and then we need some new workhorses, really. You know, so, and all organizations are like that. You have to have a certain amount of fresh blood to keep everything going, and that's how Jen's able to walk away from things like that. We also likewise walked away from Reg Bank Valley Trails, if any of you are familiar with that rail to trail program. They used to be a part of the AVLT, and we recently gave them their walking papers. They are their own organization, have their own governance and board of directors, and are doing great. So that being said, these are some of the projects we get involved in. These are just some of the little differences we make. This is the Crooked Creek Bridge at Roston, Pennsylvania. This is about a 240-foot span, I believe. And as you can see on the right in this picture, this was the original decking that was laid in 1990, 91-ish, or, you know, when the original, well, I bet this was laid around 95. So you're looking at about a 25-year-old piece of wood there. And the big problem with that was, at that time, there was a moratorium by the DCNR and some of the environmental protection agencies of using wood that had cupric arsenate in it over bodies of water. So we were forbidden to use treated lumber during that period. So this bridge didn't last as long as we would have liked it to. We recently redecked that earlier this summer in the spring. We put 240 new feet of 2x6 lumber down. 2x6s are not 2x6s. So we have about 500 boards going across that bridge. It was double tracked originally. So what you're seeing on the left here is one of our other workers. He's getting paid. His name's Chase, and he is welding brackets on. We had enough leftover grant money and material to put a picnic area out over the water next to the actual Rails to Trails. So that's pretty cool. It was a nice addition where you can sit out and actually look down into the river, or the Crooked Creek. This is a railroad turntable. We have a lot of historical preservation projects that go on, because along with the railroad bed, we inherited all the infrastructure that was still there. You know, there weren't any buildings per se, but there were a lot of these really cool things. This is a locomotive turntable, which was originally used to guide rails into different sidings to be put in engine houses, and also was used to turn the locomotives 180 degrees without having to have a large Y where they could turn the locomotive around by doing like a 3-point turn. Currently, it's a lot further along than that. We actually have railings on it. It's being made into a pedestrian exhibit where you can walk out. It's also going to be ADA compliant when we're done, so that people will be able to get their wheelchairs out on it and really see what the piece of equipment was like back then and how it worked. And we also put up historical signage as we go along with those projects too. This is a historic coaling tower at Red Bank, Pennsylvania. When we acquired this coaling tower, as was the same with the turntable, they were buried in brush. There were trees that were taller than the building next to it. So those were all cut. This was all graded. We now mow this and maintain it. It's actually the corridor down through there's actually brush hogged pretty wide and looks a lot different than even this. This is an earlier picture of some of that project. And you can see we had to paint it because it was covered in pretty nasty graffiti and things like that. It had become more of an eyesore than a historic landmark at the time. So that was another project we worked on. And this right here is the centerpiece of what we're working on right now. This is a $10 million project. So going from the Armstrong Rails to Trails Association, which was the volunteer organization, to the land trust, made me go from being in charge of about $65,000 at a time to budgets of several million, which is sometimes mind-boggling. You know, you look at some of these spreadsheets and stuff and you're just like, holy cow. But we also have one of you, Jen. We have a grant writing. She is a guru, and this, I can't say enough about Chris Ziegler. She is amazing. She knows how to like squeeze blood from even the hardest of turnips. I'm telling you, like it's amazing where this woman gets money from. And she has a lot of good visions. We're looking at a lot of like multimodal programs where we're trying to get some areas where we can get river access for kayakers and things near our parking areas and things. So we're looking beyond just the hiking and biking and family activities that go with the trail, but also looking towards the water and other things as resources to bring in more people. And as far as more people goes, God, we've had like 3 times the traffic that we're normally used to with this COVID thing. Like everybody is out walking. It's unbelievable. It's really cool to see that this many people engaging in some outdoor stuff. So maybe that'll rub off on them and they'll enjoy the outdoors more after we're a little bit more back to normal. This is the roof of the tunnel. As you can see in the beginning of the entrance here, you can see that little bit of light peeking through. So this is the roof of the tunnel. There was a gaping hole big enough to drive a semi through at the time. And it had also, those barricades that you see were actually mandated by the PUC, who said that that tunnel had to be closed for safety reasons. So it's still closed to this particular day, but we're hoping by next year to have a ribbon cutting ceremony and be able to open this up to the public. So you'll get to see a little bit of the progress we've made on that. This was our groundbreaking ceremony in April of 2020. Jen, you might recognize some of the people in this picture. I'm sure you guys work with the DCNR pretty closely, maybe. We also work with a lot of different agencies. But one of the big reasons I put this in here, aside from the obvious that it's, you know, the beginning of our work on the tunnel, is that some of these opportunities when you volunteer for agencies like this, I could have never pictured in my wildest dreams that I would be bumping elbows with some of the people in this picture. I don't know if you can see my pointer, but the guy on the left here in the blue shirt, that is Scott Hutchinson. He's one of our state representatives. The lady here in the tan jacket is a regional advisor for the DCNR, which is Erin Wiley Moyer. And then over here in the blue shirt, the tall, thin woman about to blow up the dynamite in one of the county commissioner's hands is actually Cindy Adams Dunn, who's currently our secretary of the DCNR. There are 6 county commissioners from 2 different counties. There's just a plethora of really important people here. So like if you're looking for a job, these are all people that you could possibly talk to for letters of recommendation that, you know, once you get acquainted for them, or possibly, you know, send them an email, you know, like possibly, you know, I could send an email to the DCNR and do a little name dropping too. So it's an unbelievable networking opportunity to get involved with some of this stuff. But this, anyways, this was the groundbreaking. And I also want you guys to make note of how much crap is growing out of the front of the tunnel, because that'll come into play here in a little bit. So this is the first phase of the tunnel. They actually put this in there. It's a concrete form. It was a one-time use, humongous steel structure that was designed to plug the hole while they pumped concrete in from the top. And that's what that gentleman on the right is walking on top of, is the poured concrete that filled that gaping hole and plugged that off. But that was not completely structurally sound. It was not the finished product. It just filled the hole. So the next step, which was phase 2, is they put this giant jacket through the tunnel. They've done this similarly in Climax Tunnel over in Red Bank, if any of you have ever ridden that trail. But our prescription calls for sections of this jacketing at both ends of the tunnel, because we end up with a lot of frost wedging at the ends where the weather gets to the tunnel the most. You end up with a lot of spalling and cracked concrete and just a lot of really big problems. And that was why we had all this problem in the first place. So this new jacket has like a permeable fill. It's a concrete product, but it's actually porous, and it allows water to penetrate through it should that be necessary, and flow down the outside to a French drain system. And then on the right, I don't know if you can see me up in the upper left-hand corner of the tunnel entrance there, I'm actually hanging on a set of rappelling gear. Rich and I, my buddy, do a lot of high angle work for them because we have a lot of rescue and climbing experience. So we get to do a lot of cool things whenever they need people to get up on stuff safely and cut brush or do whatever. We just got done cleaning the face of a retaining wall at an iron furnace last weekend with our climbing gear. So it's fun yet challenging. So it's a pretty cool thing to get into. And then last but not least, this is one of our little projects. This is one of the minor projects. We do a lot of these benches. They're like $250 a piece. And donors can have a plaque put on if they want to remember grandma, or we have one that even recognizes a pet that passed away. So anything you want to have put on them, you can have put on them for a $250 investment. We have little pavilions that are attached to a picnic table that we have programs where we sell those and install them in different places, with little plaques on them and things. So it's one of the ways we raise money. And that's our little fun trail vehicle we get to cruise around on. So, and I've learned all kinds of cool skills. I never operated a backhoe in my life, nor a skid steer, and I've had to learn all like the heavy equipment operating stuff, brush hogging, so it's different. You kind of open up yourself to a lot of really cool different stuff. But that's really it. I mean, if I can give you guys one takeaway from all this, I guess it all goes back to the slide at the beginning, where Anne Frank is saying, it really doesn't take that much to make a difference. Even just, help a blind person cross the street, whatever it may be. When you see that need, somebody struggling with something, don't be afraid to just be like, hey, can I help you put that plywood in the back of your truck at Lowe's, or, or whatever, you can make a difference anywhere, at any time, any place. Just do it, don't be afraid to step up. And I guess that's it, guys.
Thank you very much, Brett. It was a beautiful story, another beautiful story. I did forget to recognize that Brett is a veteran of the Persian Gulf War, and he sat on an armed freighter off of Kuwait loaded with ammunition and fuel during that conflict. So we owe you a debt of gratitude and appreciation for that service. Two wonderful stories and beautiful people showing that you guys can make a difference, and hopefully illuminating the reality that there's a lot of pathways for you students to pursue, and both in school and beyond. Brett is right there in the mineralogy class this semester, struggling through with everybody else, and he's a board member on the Trails Association while he is a student. So with that, I'll go ahead and say that I know we have to have students split to other courses, but Julie, we have one more seminar this semester, and then anyone that wants to hang out for question and answers is welcome to do so till our interest peters out.
Yeah, so in 2 weeks, we have Seth Sikora Bodie, who just received his PhD. Is it late last week or early? I think it was late last week. And he'll be speaking about marine protective areas. So yeah, that's our last one, but that'll be 2 weeks from today at noon.
We're also busy lining up speakers for next semester, and we're going to have another wonderful roll call of great stories.
Yeah, so do you want me to just mention, so coming up for the spring, we've got a couple interesting talks. We have Matt Boyer, who has been locked on a ship in the Arctic, doing research on an icebreaker. We've got Katie Tamulanis, I think is her name. Last name, I can't remember how we say that, who's going to be talking about some of her work in, Tam, help me out. What is she? I'm having trouble remembering what exactly she does. So she hasn't exactly said what her topic is going to be on. And then
professor of sedimentology at
yeah, she's a sedimentologist.
Yep.
Maybe some paleontology. I'm not really sure what she's doing. So we've got some, and then Patrick, you've got a couple.
Yeah, we have Nicole Leitzinger, and she is a K-12 science teacher. So I want to illuminate the fact that I think geologists and earth scientists all recognize that we could do a better job in high school of recruiting scientists, and geology and earth science kind of gets treated like a second-class citizen compared to the biology, chemistry, and physics in the high school environment. And we would like to make a contribution to change that. And Tyler Martin, he works in oil and gas, and one of his company's big endeavors is properly abandoning orphaned wells. Mm-hmm. So Pennsylvania is a thoroughly perforated environment. You know, the oil industry was born in Pennsylvania, and we have a really heavy legacy of poor decision-making. You know, for example, during World War II, when we needed steel for munitions, they went across the landscape and they pulled the well casings out of oil and gas wells to take the steel and make tanks and bullets. And that left open boreholes, which then today become really problematic in a bunch of regards, not the least of which is fugitive methane. And there are others. We have a couple alumni who are really ornithologists and park rangers. So I routinely try to tell students that you don't actually need the degree in Parks and Rec to get a job as a ranger. And if you think about the national parks, the vast majority of them have some really intriguing geography or geology behind them. So the many different majors from our department are perfectly well prepared to go into a career pathway like that. So we have 2 months off between the terms, and you can head away for Thanksgiving being confident that we will have a wonderful lineup of presentations in the spring. And Jen, we'll pass you the codes. You're welcome to join us anytime. Any questions for Jen or Brett?
I have one for Jennifer. What was the most common discarded item you found in the river?
Well, there's two. The first thing that we have found along the river was cigarette butts. And what we have found in the river, I would say, is plastic bottles, plastic bottles and cans. You pick up a ton of those, and we recycle as much as we possibly can for those. So discard of your stuff appropriately.
It's interesting, as a little aside to that, we do a lot of cleanup along the trail. And it's amazing to me all the time when we have a lot of sections where there's a road running on the upper side of the trail and the river is on the lower side of the trail. And I'm always blown away by how much of that stuff ends up in the catch basins and then washes down culverts, goes clear under our trail, down the hill, and ends up either below in one of the catch basins below our trail, or worse yet, ends up straight out into the river like that. People don't think about that when they throw something out their car window, that's inevitably where all this stuff ends up. Everything's downstream.
And to add to that, don't forget that things that are put down a storm drain go directly to a river. They don't go to a wastewater treatment plant. And that was a huge educational process on our end. People thought, dumping paint down a storm drain, that the paint was simply going to go to the wastewater treatment plant. you know, so washing your car on the grass instead of on the driveway, or, you know, not over fertilizing your yards. You know, those are big things that people can do just at home to keep runoff from going into our waterways.
I want to spin off of that too, because I think it's really critical for me as an educator, because I can spin 1,000 stories about terrible environmental degradation, but I don't just want to depress people. One of the incredible environmental victories that we had that kind of slid by without anybody noticing was that when I was a young man, you would pull an aluminum pull tab off of the top of a can and drink the soda. And then that pull tab so often just blew away in the wind. And it was an easy challenge to galvanize people together on, because these pull tabs were all over our forests and our roads and our rivers, and they were slicing people's feet open and just delivering terrible lacerations. So, you know, they collect data in ERs about the nature of injuries. So what it required was basically every canning company on planet Earth to redesign the top of the can to create the tab that opens the beverage but does not separate from the can. So I would say that that's a fairly impressive environmental victory, because you retooled an entire industry.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm going to toss out some others real quick just because I think we need to. We realized that burning leaded gasoline was poisoning every organism on Earth and lowering the IQ of our children. So we passed an international accord and took the lead out of most gasoline. And that required retooling every internal combustion engine in every manufacturing facility all around planet Earth. And even during the Cold War, when the eagle and the bear were at odds and sworn enemies, we mutually recognized that above ground nuclear testing was doping every living thing on Earth with plutonium, which, in addition to being nastily radioactive, is an acutely toxic metal. And we agreed that no more atmospheric nuclear testing. So I have other examples, but I just want to let the students know that, you know, when facing climate change, it feels like such a horrific challenge, but we can count numerous massive environmental victories. So I guess I'll just conclude by reiterating, Brett, I love it that he captured Anne Frank saying, "It's wonderful that no one need wait a single minute before starting to change the world." I think that's a really great line. And I thank you guys for all attending. Jen and Brett, really, really magnificent. We love you guys.
Thank you.
And a good day,
Just
everybody.
as a little ending thing, if any of you guys that's still here listening, I have a .edu address. So if you guys want to email me, you can email me through Slippery Rock's email system as well. So, and if you have any questions, or you want to volunteer, or you want to buy a picnic table or whatever, just get a hold of me.
Are you both comfortable having this put on our YouTube channel so others can watch it?
Sure. And additionally, too, if you have students that would like to get in touch with me, you have my contact information. Yeah. So please pass it along.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking your time to talk to us today. It's really fascinating and inspirational.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.
Bye, everybody.
Yep, we'll see you guys later. Have a good rest of the day. I'll see you in a little bit, Dr. Hartman.
Brett, can you add your email address to the chat, or can you just tell it off the top of your head, please?
Yeah, my email address is bjm.
Jennifer, will you do the same?
The top of the chat. Yep.
That way it's in the meeting for everybody.
Thank you both.
All right, everybody, I'm signing off. Thanks a million.
Thank you, Dr. Barborak.